President Ramaphosa due to speak. Well, let's get some views on what it's like to be in the chamber when this happens. The leader of the One South Africa movement says the country needs bold and targeted economic reforms. Mmusi Maimane is suggesting reforms that would allow a labour absorption rate to increase, in other words, jobs. Well, he was once the leader of the opposition in Parliament. He joins us now. Mmusi, good evening to you. There's a huge amount that needs to be done in our country. You know what these moments, these State of the Nation address moments, can be like. How much is resting on the President? How much is resting on opposition parties as well tonight?
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to fellow South Africans. I think that is the first time at least in my recent history, that we are holding the State of the Nation at a venue outside Parliament. Tells you the somber moment that we face. It tells you that the State of the Nation is not business as usual. So it begs the absolute question tonight, given that you are in a, if you like, rented venue, given that outside that same hall, there'll be thousands of young people who join the ranks of the unemployed, that in fact the President faces a dilemma in that he has a party that is fragmented that goes to conference this year. I want to urge and say we must respect this moment, and if he has to do anything tonight, he better deliver a jobs plan, or otherwise, in fact, the speech itself will be platitudes, and I'm hoping for less commissions and more actions, if you like.
Less commissions, more action, you're saying, Mmusi, but I wonder how effective Parliament has been in its role in ensuring that the President and government more broadly does more than just deliver speeches and promises.
Well, I think more than anything, what the last 2 years have taught us in the midst of COVID is that Parliament has been dysfunctional. Because in all truth, we've been operating under a state of disaster management, which in fact inoculates or disempowers Parliament. And that Parliament hasn't fought for that power back, tells you how, in fact, ineffective some of the opposition has been. Because frankly, in the last 2 years, we should have drafted laws that say, how do we govern COVID? How do we govern a pandemic, should we get one again? And how do we ensure that citizens, our arrangements as a country, is how we like to be governed. We like to have representation, and we like to put our views across. That's how we've chosen to be governed. That we've been under executive rule for 2 years tells you how ineffective the opposition has been. But I want to urge tonight, given that the same Parliament gave President Ramaphosa 2 years of a fairly blank check to write out if you like, guarantees for COVID grants, etc., etc. He has to account tonight where all of that has gone. He has to account for corruption. And dare we forget that 354 of our fellow countrymen died last year in the middle, and his government has been found to be completely inadequate in responding to a crisis. There must be a sense of accountability on that score, but there must be another sense that says, given that youth unemployment and unemployment in general in this country has grown up so significantly, and our GDP growth is only at 0.1% instead of the 5 to 8% that we need if we're going to make a dent in unemployment. This government needs a plan. It needs bold reform. And if he doesn't deliver that, and the opposition cannot help citizens see a way forward beyond this current state that we're in as a country, we must realize without a shadow of a doubt that we need change across all fronts.
Well, Mmusi, in a way, it speaks to a broken politics. And we've seen other countries that have a broken politics, a politics that can't find solutions to their people. Their economies become broken as well. And, of course, we're dealing with problems greater than many, many other countries because of our past. What hope, then, is there to reform, reshape, renew our politics? Sometimes I think that many people despair it can ever be done.
No, I think that what at least the local government elections taught us one salient lesson is that the ANC isn't going to be in government forever. That's the first optimistic sign for all of us as South Africans, which will force all of us to say, can we formulate a movement, a system that sits in the middle that speaks to citizens who themselves, many of them are disgruntled, many of them say the current political system that is ideological has not helped them solve their problems. For me, Stephen, the hope I hold on to, and this is the project I'm engaged with in building One South Africa and a movement that will disrupt that, is to say we are hitting in 2024 the end of the nationalist era, the era of both the Afrikaner nationalism and the African nationalism. We have to find new solution into a bold new world. And that for me is exciting because it gives us an alternative to say, rather than the State of the Nation address that rely heavily on what the ANC can and cannot do, or what the opposition argue they can do better than the ANC, we must find new ways. Because if we keep wanting to repeat the old and hope for different outcomes, we're going to fail.
Very briefly, Mmusi, and if I can just ask that we show some of those pictures from Cape Town while we speak to you as the last few people make their way inside the Cape Town City Hall. I want to talk to you about what you've just said about doing things differently, getting the new in. The opposition in this country also needs to realize that merely pointing out the failures of the ANC is not exactly a successful strategy as far as getting voter confidence and ultimately those votes inside a ballot come 2024. So that too would need to change, no?
Absolutely, because that's what I'm saying. The hegemonic capture of the ANC is in the mindset of the opposition. Their basic argument is to say, can we be a better ANC in many ways? And that's in some ways, when I say we need bold, we need to say to ourselves, let's take crime. More than 500,000 people in this country have been killed since 1994. Murder. So then the question becomes, should we keep thinking we need a national SAPS and the opposition will say, well, we'll run it better, rather than actually saying, can we decentralize the police and bring them down to local grounds so that communities can take charge? When we think about education, are we just going to carry on saying, let's just keep the education system as it is, or are we going to reform and improve standards and boldly say we can introduce charter education? When we think about the economy, and I can go on and on, because it requires us to unhinge ourselves from the way the ANC has shaped the world to say, can we bring about change? And that is, in fact, the task that awaits this country for the next 2 years if we are going to compete on an equal footing with other developing nations who are growing at a faster level.